How can you best protect your children's financial future? That's what we're going to be talking about in the main topic today. My top 10 tips to financially protect your children. Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Desberger, your one and only HopeFilled financial coach, and I'm happy that you're here with us today. So I was just looking around the house trying to find a particular CD that I could use to add a meme to last week's episode, which you've already seen, so we'll see if I found it. But while looking for this particular CD, I found a couple of Easter eggs. And these were the Easter eggs that I used with my wife to help announce to my parents and to her parents that we were expecting our firstborn. For my parents, we did a little bit of an Easter egg hunt that landed on a final egg where they had to match a whole bunch of clues that led them around the house to find the answer that we were expecting. And for my wife's family, we hid a bunch of individual Easter eggs throughout the Easter egg hunt instead of it being like a linear treasure hunt. And each Easter egg had a little strip of paper with more or less it looked like a crossword puzzle entry for just one row, one word. But there were only a handful of letters that were in there, maybe like 1 to 3 for each piece of paper. And if you found all the Easter eggs and you lined it up and you found all the different letters, it would say "we are expecting." And while that was exciting, I could not at that point predict how much my life was going to change holding that baby boy for the first time. I love Oliver. He is a wonderful kid, and I would do anything for him. You're told as an expecting parent, you just don't know how much you're going to love the kids until they're there, until you're holding them. You're looking at this innocent, brand new face, and you're like, I would die for you. I would do anything to keep you safe. And as parents, it hurts us when we see our children go through something where they get hurt or they suffer. We want to fix it for them. I'll give you an example of how much I really want to protect my sons, how much I want to be there for them. Oliver just this past weekend, for no apparent reason, crossed his eyes and got them stuck. I think he might need glasses. We have an appointment for an eye doctor tomorrow, and we'll see what needs to happen. But it was bothering me a lot that his eyes just all of a sudden went cross-eyed without any rhyme or reason. I started worrying about things that could be really bad, as some of us parents tend to do. And I want to fix it for him. Because I'm not an eye doctor and I don't know exactly what's wrong, I can't. There's very little I can do other than wait for the appointment tomorrow. So I feel a little helpless with him right now, and I don't want you to feel that way when it comes to taking care of your kiddos with personal finance. I can imagine many scenarios in the future where Oliver and or Isaac are going to run into financial struggles that I can't do anything about. But since I'm their dad, I can do everything I can to set them up for financial success now. Help protect them from failures that may otherwise be my fault or leave me wishing I wish I could have done something more for them to set them up better for life. I want to do the best that I can to protect them, and that's what we're going to cover in the main topic. We're going to talk about my top 10 ways that you can protect your child's financial future. For the main topic today, we are covering my top 10 tips to best financially protect your child, not only today, but into their future. These are going to be broken up into 2 general categories, things that you can do for yourself and then things that you can do specifically for your children. In other words, we're going to be talking about the things that you can do to put your own oxygen mask on that helps your children before you actually help put their mask on in an airplane. With that, my first tip is to have an emergency fund for you. See, if you do not have an emergency fund and you don't have something between you and an emergency throwing your whole financial plan off right now, it could be a detriment to the child. They're going to see you stressing out more. And if there's a financial emergency that involves them, say a broken arm and you have to rush them to the ER, it's going to be less stress on you and better for them if you have that emergency fund in place. Because you're not going to be worried about the money, you're going to be worried about them. You're going to be present with them, and that is going to make a difference. Tip number 2, make sure that you have appropriate insurance in place and that you update your own insurance when you have children. For example, if you have a teenager, make sure they have good, healthy auto insurance. Auto insurance, especially for boys, is so incredibly expensive, but if you were to cut back on the coverage in order to make it affordable, you could be putting your children at significant undue risk, your children and you. When it comes to health insurance, you want to make sure that you have a good health insurance plan or alternative that's going to cover you so that if there's a broken arm and you rush them to the ER, you're able to cover what you can up to a deductible, and then insurance kicks in and carries the rest of the medical care through to the end. Additionally, if you have homeowners insurance or renters insurance that requires that you update how many people are living in the house, you're going to want to reach out to them when you have a child, or if you haven't updated it in a while, you might take a peek at it. Make sure that the liability on this insurance is appropriate for raising a family. And before we move on to tip number 3, there are going to be plenty of sales pitches for insurance products targeted at you and your children that you do not need. I did a whole episode focused on whole life insurance that's targeted for children, policies you can take out on your child. And I started by really leaning into the Gerber whole life policies that are out there with the TV ads, and I expanded to the topic in general. If you've ever thought about whole life insurance for your child, please go check out that episode. And I'm going to encourage you not to do anything until you do. And if you don't check out that episode, just know that life insurance is to protect income, replace someone's income if they pass away. And children don't have income. I want you to understand what the purpose of such a policy would be. And I want you to understand that if you have an emergency fund, is that going to be enough to pay for a funeral if that's the kind of thing that is being marketed to you that you find appealing? Now, let's move on to tip number 3, budget with your children. And I'm not just talking about working a budget for them with them. I'm talking about getting them involved in the conversation that you have with your budget meetings. Now, don't get me wrong, children do not get a vote when it comes to the budget meeting between you and your spouse. You need to still have that time. But what I want you to do is, as is age appropriate, expose them to the normality of budgeting together. Expose them to the normal money conversations that you have as a family. That way, budgeting can start to feel normal and it can start to feel like something that isn't scary. Talking about money in general can feel less taboo if we simply introduce these topics where it's organically appropriate. Okay, tip number 4, this is an extension of tip number 3. As you're talking about investing, talk to your children about investing. Investing is a scary thing because we just don't talk about it a lot in the average household. If we talk to our children about investing, it's going to make it feel more normal. And by the time they hit an age where they can actually start investing, doing it intentionally, they're going to be able to approach investing with enthusiasm instead of fear. Now, I've got one more thing that you can do with your own personal financial life that kind of focuses on you that really helps the kids, and that's going to be get them involved around tax season. I'm not saying to put any responsibility on them, but talk about taxes. Show them what happens when you're filing your taxes. Show them the process that you have to go through. If you ever get audited, make sure that they're aware of what's going on if it's appropriate for their age, and just help them understand that this is part of life. In the education system today, personal finance is not taught very well everywhere. And that's definitely true when it comes to budgeting, investing, and taxes. So when you have these topics and you're working through them, it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure that you take those learning opportunities and translate them to your children so that they can take that and run with it when it's their turn to start making decisions in their adult lives. Okay, tip number 6, and that's going to refer to last week's episode, 401 Kid. HopeFilled Financial Footstep number 6 is stellar if you want to encourage your children to build good saving habits, to grow in frugality, and to achieve really large savings goals with your help. 401 Kid basically has you offering a match to your children with a limit for goals you approve of, like higher education or buying a car. And this is really the start of you putting their oxygen mask on by being able to contribute financially to their future while also enhancing their ability to manage money, enhancing their ability to relate with money in a healthy manner. And for many of you, 401 Kid is going to involve saving for some form of higher education. So for tip number 7, please talk to your children about not going deeply into debt. I think it's absolutely crazy that we have 17, 18, 19-year-olds who are going to college, taking out tens of thousands of dollars in debt and not fully emotionally or intellectually grasping what that's going to do for their financial future. Help your children understand what debt can do to them. Help them understand the dangers of debt and encourage them to do everything they can to remain debt free. When I was in college, I did not have a car loan. I did not have student loans. I graduated debt free and owned my car outright when I got into the bigger working world. I was recently asked, what did I do to set myself up for the financial success that I have already achieved before I turned 30? And my number one first answer was avoiding debt through the season of my higher education. Reason being, if I came out with tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, I would be starting behind the eight ball. Instead of being able to plan for my financial future, I'd be working on digging myself out of that hole. And it was so much easier to build wealth intentionally without having to get out of debt first. I'm going to cover how I made it through college debt free in a future episode, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Okay, number 8 is one of my favorite topics when it comes to protecting your children. This one comes down to identity theft. I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but please, for the love of all things good and decent, freeze your minors' credit. If you freeze their credit, you go to all the different credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, and you freeze their credit. No one is going to be able to somehow get their social security number and open up an account in their name. Or at the very least, it's going to become significantly harder for an identity thief to take out debt in your child's name. I think the stats were incredible on how many children by the age of 18 have had their identity stolen and have had money taken out that is just trashing their credit history. Talk about starting behind the eight ball. This is something that you can do that just takes a little bit of time and intentionality to sincerely protect your children's future, financial and otherwise. As you embark on that, though, make sure that you save the information that is required to unfreeze that credit in the future so that your children have the ability, when they're of age, to do so, to unfreeze their credit when it's appropriate. I kind of like the idea of having a little handoff box, which has all of their sensitive documents and financial information that you can pass to them, which reminds me, tip number 9 is going to be have a will. And you're going to want to, as soon as it's appropriate for your children to know about the will, have them understand what's in it. They don't necessarily need to know how much they would inherit if something horrible would happen to you, but it's important that they know what the will says and where it lives. And as they're growing up, as they move out of the house, it's going to be important for them to know what the latest version of your will is. When they still live with you as minors, one thing you can put in a will that's very helpful for protecting your children is who's going to take care of them if something awful were to happen to you and or your spouse. For my 2 sons, we have godparents picked out that are designated as the primary and secondary caretakers if something were to happen to Amanda and I. And as a part of our plan for having these godparents take care of our children if something were to happen to us, we have set our contingent beneficiaries for life insurance to be those godparents. That way, the money that was tied to our life insurance, since we're not needing to replace each other's incomes if we're both gone, can go to raising the children. I don't want raising our children to be a financial burden on the caretakers that are listed in our will. So it only makes sense to make sure that they are taken care of and they don't see the responsibility of our children as a financial burden. They see it as an honor. Finally, let's move on to tip number 10. I've also recorded an episode about this before, and that's going to be don't support your adult children forever. We want to raise our children to be good, strong, independent adults. And this involves easing them into that independence over time and not financially supporting them through all of life. It might be easier, especially if you can afford financially supporting them, but what it does is it gives them a handicap. It gives them a handicap of dependence. And that dependence can become toxic. It can teach an opposite lesson. Yeah, I've mentioned it in the story. I really want to do anything and everything I can to help my children not suffer, but that's not always going to be the best thing for them, because hurt and suffering can help temper them into strong, independent adults as is appropriate for them. There's some harm that I, as a parent, am definitely responsible for cutting in and protecting them from, but I can't shield them from everything in life. They can't be innocent children forever. They have to grow up. And giving them the opportunity to be independent adults is noble and it's respectable. It's not cruel to set a timeline for when they are to move out and when they are to engage with their adult lives separate from your support. In fact, I think it's a rather loving thing to do. Just make sure that you make your expectations clear, communicate well about them so that they know that this is coming and they are encouraged to plan for it. With that, I want to know, were there any tips or any actions that you've taken to protect children, financially or otherwise, that I didn't cover in today's episode? If so, please leave them in the comments below so we can all learn from them. And until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.